Inside these massive ships, translation systems worked frantically to convert the hegemony's standard surrender message into Earth's languages. Soon, every television, radio, phone, and computer across the planet broadcast the same chilling message. People of Earth, you are now under the protection and authority of the galactic hegemony. Resistance is both futile and unnecessary. Submit to biometric cataloging and resource assessment within the next 12 hours. Those who comply will be treated fairly. Those who resist will be removed. 200 miles off the coast of Japan, beneath the churning waters of the Pacific Ocean, Admiral Lee stood on the bridge of the EDF Prometheus. The massive Dreadnought had been hidden for centuries, waiting for this exact moment. Around him, crew members freshly awakened from cryosleep worked at stations that looked both ancient and impossibly advanced. "Status report," Lee demanded, his voice steady, despite having been frozen for 300 years. "All systems online," replied his executive officer. "The Valiant and Defiance are also at full combat readiness. We're receiving feeds from the surface. The aliens are broadcasting surrender terms." Lee nodded grimly. "And Secretary General, Park, safe in the command bunker, sir. She's patched through to the main display." The central screen flickered to life, showing Park's determined face. "Admiral, the hegemony has just destroyed Shanghai as a demonstration of power. Millions dead in seconds." Lee's jaw tightened. "Then we have our answer, no more hesitation." He turned to his communications officer. "Signal the Valiant and Defiance. Launch Sequence Alpha. Let's show these invaders who they're dealing with." Across the planet's oceans, the seafloor began to churn. Massive doors disguised as natural formations slid open, and water boiled as three enormous vessels rose toward the surface. In the lead hegemony ship, Commander Kim was reviewing the initial bombing data when an officer interrupted with urgency in his voice. "Sir, 3 large vessels have been detected. They're coming from the planet's oceans." Kim smiled with amusement. "Show me." The hologram displayed 3 ships, each nearly half the size of his own vessel. Their design was unlike anything he had seen before, a strange mix of sleek curves and angular sections that seemed both primitive and oddly advanced. "They're powering up weapons systems," reported the officer. Kim laughed out loud. "Let them. Our shields can withstand anything this primitive world could produce." He turned to his weapons officer. "Target one of those vessels. Show them what happens when they challenge the hegemony." The largest alien ship fired a blinding purple beam that streaked toward the Prometheus. Admiral Lee didn't even flinch. "Dimensional shields," he ordered calmly. The beam struck something invisible several miles from the Earth vessel. Instead of impacting, it seemed to twist and fold in on itself before disappearing completely. On the hegemony command ship, silence fell as the crew stared in disbelief. "Impossible," whispered Kim. "Scan those ships again. What technology are they using?" Before his crew could respond, Admiral Lee gave the order that would change everything. "All ships return fire, Protocol Omega." The 3 Earth dreadnoughts began to glow with a soft blue light. Then, with a sound like thunder that carried even through the vacuum of space, they fired. Beams of what looked like liquid light shot toward the hegemony fleet. Where they touched, alien ships simply came apart, not exploding but separating into their component pieces as though invisible hands were disassembling them. "Our shields!" screamed the hegemony defense officer. "They're not just penetrating them, they're ignoring them completely." Commander Kim gripped his command chair as his flagship shuddered. "Impossible. Nothing can bypass phase-shifted shields." But the evidence was before his eyes as his mighty invasion fleet began to crumble. "What are they?" he demanded of no one in particular. In the Prometheus, Admiral Lee stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the enemy fleet disintegrate. The weapons they were using had been developed during Earth's golden age, technology so advanced that modern humans had forgotten it was even possible. "Gravitational disruptors," explained his weapons officer. "They selectively alter the binding forces between molecules. The enemy ships are literally falling apart at the seams." The battle lasted less than 8 minutes. When it was over, the mighty hegemony invasion force was reduced to drifting debris. Only Commander Kim's flagship remained, severely damaged but intact enough for a message. Admiral Lee opened a channel. "This is Admiral Lee of the Earth Defense Force. Your demonstration cost millions of innocent lives. Consider our response a demonstration of our own. You have 1 hour to leave our solar system. Any hegemony vessel found within our borders after Key. That time will be destroyed without warning." On his crippled ship, Commander Kim stared at the image of the human admiral on his screen. How could this be possible? Earth was supposed to be a primitive world, ripe for conquest, like thousands before it. Instead, his fleet had been decimated by technology the hegemony had never even imagined. As his damaged ship limped away from Earth, Kim knew the hegemony would never believe what had happened here. But they would come to believe it soon enough. When the full might of Earth's forgotten arsenal was unleashed, in the Prometheus, Admiral Lee turned to his communications officer. "Send word to all facilities. Begin awakening the rest of the fleet. The hegemony won't take this defeat lightly. They'll be back, and next time, they'll bring everything they have." Dr. Bay rubbed her tired eyes as she stared at the ancient computer terminal. For 3 days straight, she had barely left this cramped room deep within the Prometheus, trying to unlock the Dreadnought's encrypted historical database. As one of Earth's most brilliant quantum programmers, she had been awakened from cryosleep specifically for this task. "More coffee?" asked her assistant, placing a steaming cup beside her. "Thanks," she murmured, not looking up from the screen. "I think I'm getting close." Around her, the walls of the ship hummed with power. The Prometheus was fully awake now, along with 23 other dreadnoughts that had emerged from hidden bases around the planet. Admiral Lee had ordered them into defensive positions throughout the solar system, preparing for the retaliatory strike everyone knew was coming. Dr. Bay's fingers flew across the holographic keyboard as she tried another decryption sequence. The screen flickered, then suddenly blazed with streams of data. "I'm in," she whispered, eyes widening as information flooded the display. Hours later, she stood before the ship's senior officers in the command center, her face pale. Behind her, the main screen displayed star maps and historical records that had been hidden for centuries. "What I'm about to tell you will change everything we thought we knew about human history," she began. "These ships, this technology, they weren't built to protect us from alien invasion. They were built to prevent us from becoming invaders again." The room fell silent as she tapped her tablet, bringing up an ancient star chart on the main display. Thousands of systems were highlighted in blue. This was the human empire at its height, roughly 15,000 years ago. We called ourselves the architects then. Humanity didn't evolve on Earth. We came here after nearly destroying ourselves in a massive civil war that spanned the galaxy. Admiral Lee leaned forward. "That's impossible. Human civilization on Earth is only about 10,000 years old." "Because we started over," Dr. Bay explained. "The survivors of the war made a choice. They saw what advanced technology coupled with human aggression had done to the galaxy. They deliberately regressed our technological development, erased our history, and established a monitoring system to ensure we developed more peacefully the second time around." She swiped to another image, blueprints for the Dreadnoughts. These ships were left as a failsafe, along with their crews in cryosleep. If Earth was ever threatened from outside, they would awaken to protect us, not to help us rebuild an empire, but to ensure humanity survived long enough to evolve beyond our destructive tendencies. The weapons officer raised his hand. "But if we were so advanced, how did we fall? And what about the hegemony? Where did they come from?" Dr. Bay nodded. "The records address that. The war lasted centuries. We fought using weapons that could destroy stars. Eventually, the various human factions were so weakened that some of our former servant species, races we had uplifted and engineered, rose up and claimed territory. The hegemony appears to be descended from one of those races." She pulled up an image of a hegemony ship alongside schematics from the ancient database. "See these design similarities? They're using modified versions of our old technology. Technology they likely scavenged from abandoned outposts and colonies after our fall, but they never fully understood the principles behind it. They've been copying and adapting without comprehending the fundamental science." The room erupted in conversation until Admiral Lee raised his hand for silence. How reliable is this information? Could it be propaganda from that era? The sky above Seoul darkened as the enormous hegemony vessels moved into position. Their sleek, metallic hulls reflected sunlight in blinding flashes as they descended through Earth's atmosphere. People stopped in the streets, looking up with terror and wonder at the first confirmed alien contact in human history. Idikta Bey shook her head. I've cross-referenced it with the ship's knowledge systems. The physics models match what our weapons and drives are actually doing. This is real, Admiral. We were the original spacefaring race. We seeded the stars with life. And then we nearly destroyed everything we built. Far across the galaxy, the 7 members of the Hegemony High Council sat in stunned silence as they reviewed Commander Kim's report. The holographic display showed the Earth dreadnoughts dismantling their invasion fleet with disturbing ease. Impossible, whispered Councillor Jin, the oldest member. No primitive world could possess such technology. Commander Kim stood at attention, still bearing wounds from the battle. I witnessed it myself, councillors. Their weapons ignored our shields completely. They seemed to operate on principles unknown to our science. The council leader rose from her ornate chair. Could these be the weapons of the precursors? A nervous murmur spread through the chamber. Every spacefaring race knew of the precursors, the mysterious beings who had supposedly ruled the galaxy eons ago before vanishing. All that remained were fragments of their technology, ancient ruins, and the fundamental principles of faster-than-light travel they had discovered. If Earth has somehow uncovered intact precursor technology, said another councillor, they represent an existential threat to the hegemony. The council leader's face hardened. Then we must eliminate this threat immediately. Dispatch the Armada of Judgment. Even Commander Kim looked shocked. The entire Armada, that's over 3,000 warships, and they have never known defeat, the leader replied coldly. Whatever ancient weapons these humans have discovered, they cannot stand against the combined might of our greatest fleet. Back on Earth, celebrations of the initial victory were tempered by the knowledge that a greater threat was coming. In cities around the world, people gathered in front of massive screens as Secretary General Park addressed the planet. Fellow citizens of Earth, she began, her voice steady. Today we stand at a crossroads in human history. We have discovered truths about our past that change everything we thought we knew about ourselves, and we face a threat from the stars that will test our very survival. Dr. Bey watched from the command center of the Prometheus, thinking about the terrible choice that faced humanity now. The database had revealed more than just history. It contained the knowledge to rebuild humanity's ancient empire, to reclaim the stars that had once been theirs, but it also showed exactly why their ancestors had chosen to start over, the corrupting influence of too much power, too quickly, the arrogance that had led to a war that nearly extinguished all life in the galaxy. Admiral, she said quietly, there's something else you need to see. She pulled up one final file, a message left by the architects of Earth's second chance. To those who awakened the fleet, read the ancient text. Remember that our greatest enemy was always ourselves. The warning came at dawn. Earth's long-range sensors lit up like a Christmas tree as thousands of warp signatures appeared at the edge of the solar system. Admiral Lee was awakened from his first real sleep in days by the urgent call. They're here, said his executive, officer without preamble. 3,247 ships, the largest fleet we've ever detected. Lee dressed quickly and made his way to the Prometheus command center. The massive holographic display showed the approaching Hegemony Armada, a swarm of red dots moving steadily toward Earth. In contrast, Earth's defenses were represented by just 37 blue markers, the dreadnoughts that had been awakened from their centuries-long slumber. Status report, Lee demanded as he took his command chair. All 37 dreadnoughts are combat-ready, replied his tactical officer. The Hegemony fleet is advancing in standard conquest formation. They'll reach Mars orbit in approximately 6 hours? Lee nodded grimly. The odds were impossible. Nearly 100 enemy ships for each of Earth's vessels. No conventional military force could hope to win against such overwhelming numbers, but Earth's dreadnoughts were far from conventional. Get me Dr. Bey, Lee ordered. The scientist had been working non-stop, diving deeper into the ancient database, unlocking more secrets about their own vessel's capabilities. Dr. Bay's tired face appeared on a side screen. Behind her, complex equations floated in holographic displays. "Admiral, I've found something," she said without greeting. "These ships can do far more than we've asked of them. The weapon systems we used against the initial invasion fleet, that was just a fraction of their capability." "Explain," Lee said simply. "The architects, our ancestors, had a fundamentally different understanding of physics than we do now. These ships don't just manipulate energy, they manipulate the underlying fabric of reality itself." Lee leaned forward. "Can you make it work?" Dr. Bay nodded. "I've already uploaded new combat protocols to all fleet vessels, your tactical officers. We'll find them under Omega contingencies. But Admiral, using these weapons comes with risks. The kind of forces we'll be unleashing. Could they threaten Earth?" She hesitated. "If used improperly, yes. That's why our ancestors locked away this knowledge in the first place." Lee was silent for a long moment. "The alternative is subjugation or extinction. Upload the protocols. I'll make sure the fleet commanders understand the risks." 6 hours later, the battle lines were drawn near the orbit of Mars. The Hegemony Armada had arranged itself in an enormous three-dimensional grid formation that seemed to fill the sky. Thousands of warships, each powerful, enough to level a city. Aboard the Hegemony flagship, High Admiral Sue looked at the pitiful human defense force with contempt. 37 ships against the Armada of Judgment," he scoffed. "Their victory against Commander Kim was clearly a fluke. Today, we restore the natural order." He raised his hand dramatically. "All ships, commence firing. Thousands of energy." Beams lanced toward the Earth vessels, enough firepower to vaporize a small moon. But instead of evasive maneuvers, the human Dreadnought simply held position. "Sir," called out Sue's sensor officer in alarm, "the human vessels are changing." On the tactical display, the 37 Earth Dreadnoughts began to shimmer and distort. The energy beams from the Hegemony ships passed through them as if they were ghosts. Aboard the Prometheus, Admiral Lee felt a strange sensation as the ship's phase drive activated. The entire vessel had shifted partially out of normal, space-time existing simultaneously in multiple dimensions. "Phase shift complete," reported his tactical officer. "Hegemony weapons are passing through us with zero effect." Lee nodded. "Implement battle plan Omega. All ships, prepare to engage." The 37 Earth Dreadnoughts suddenly accelerated to impossible speeds, moving so fast they seemed to multiply on the Hegemony sensors. Before the alien fleet could adjust their targeting, Earth's vessels were among them. What followed wasn't just a battle, it was a display of technological supremacy that defied comprehension. The Dreadnought Valiant passed directly through a Hegemony cruiser, phasing its matter through the enemy vessel. As it emerged on the other side, it solidified again, but left behind a microscopic singularity in the heart of the alien ship. The Hegemony cruiser imploded instantly, crushed into a point the size of a grain of sand. The Dreadnought Defiance opened what appeared to be windows in space itself, creating shortcuts through the battlefield that allowed it to appear seemingly everywhere at once. It fired conventional weapons through these spatial apertures, striking Hegemony vessels from impossible angles, bypassing their shields entirely. Most terrifying of all was the flagship Prometheus. Under Lee's command, it demonstrated the apex of the architect's technology. The massive vessel projected a field that selectively altered the flow of time. Hegemony ships caught in this field experienced hours in the span of seconds, their fuel depleting, their crews aging, their systems failing as time itself became a weapon against them. On his flagship, High Admiral Sue watched in horror as his invincible armada disintegrated around him. Despite outnumbering the human vessels nearly 100 to 1, his ships were being systematically destroyed by forces he couldn't even comprehend. "This is impossible," he shouted, as another battle group vanished from his tactical display. "Nothing can defeat the Armada of Judgment, nothing." His communications officer turned from his console, face pale. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the human flagship." Admiral Lee's face appeared on the main screen. Unlike Sue, he appeared calm, almost sorrowful. "High Admiral of the Hegemony," Lee began, "you have witnessed a fraction of our capabilities. Your fleet is being decimated. I offer you this one chance. Withdraw your remaining forces immediately. Acknowledge Earth's sovereignty and independence. Provide reparations for your unprovoked attack on our cities. Do these things, and this conflict ends today." Sue's face contorted with rage. "You dare dictate terms to the Galactic Hegemony? We have ruled the stars for 10,000 years. We will never surrender to primitives." Lee shook his head sadly. "You fail to understand. We are not primitives who discovered advanced technology. We are the ones who created it in the first place. Your empire is built on the remnants of ours." Before Sue could respond, the transmission cut off. He turned to his tactical display in time to see the Prometheus accelerate toward his position. "All remaining ships," he shrieked. "Concentrate fire on the human flagship." But it was too late. The Prometheus phased directly through his shields and defense screen, rematerializing meters from his own vessel. Through the viewport, Sue could see Admiral Lee standing on his bridge, looking directly at him. For a moment, time seemed to stop as the two commanders regarded each other across the void. Then Lee raised his hand in a gesture that was somehow both a greeting and a farewell. The battle for Seoul had been decided, but the larger war was just beginning. The massive view screen on the Prometheus showed the remains of the once mighty Hegemony Armada. Twisted metal and scattered debris floated silently against the backdrop of Mars' rust-red surface. Of the 3,000 ships that had come to conquer Earth, fewer than 200 had managed to flee. Admiral Lee stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his face solemn despite the victory. Beside him, Dr. Bay worked frantically at a console, diving deeper into the ship's ancient database, now that all security protocols had been disabled. "We've won the battle," Lee said quietly to Secretary General Park, who had joined them on the flagship after the fighting ended. "But what comes next?" Park stared at the debris field. "We defended ourselves, that was necessary, but now we hold power that nearly destroyed the galaxy once before." Dr. Bay looked up suddenly from her console, her eyes wide. "You need to see this," she said, her voice trembling slightly. With a few quick gestures, she transferred her findings to the main view screen. The debris field disappeared, replaced by star maps, historical images, and scientific data streaming faster than the eye could follow. "I've accessed the complete historical archive," she explained. "Not just the fragments we found before the battle. Everything." The screen stabilized on an image of a spiral galaxy, the Milky Way, with thousands of systems highlighted in blue. "This was our domain," Dr. Bay said softly. "We were the architects, the first sentient race to reach the stars. We didn't just conquer the galaxy, we shaped it." The image shifted to show strange vessels seeding barren planets with biological material. "We carried life to lifeless worlds," she continued. "We engineered ecosystems, guided evolution, uplifted promising species. Every spacefaring race in the galaxy today exists because of us." Admiral Lee's brow furrowed. "And the hegemony?" Dr. Bay nodded. "One of our creations, but they never knew their true origins. After our empire collapsed, they found our abandoned outposts, our derelict ships and stations. They reverse-engineered what they could, but they never understood the principles behind the technology. They've been using copies of copies for generations, each less effective than the last." Secretary General Park stepped closer to the screen. "If what you're saying is true, then the hegemony's entire civilization is built on misunderstood human technology." "Yes," Dr. Bay confirmed, "and that's not all." She changed the display again, showing a map of what appeared to be installations scattered throughout the galaxy. "These are automated outposts, defense systems, and manufacturing facilities we left behind. Most have been dormant for millennia, but they're still out there waiting for the proper recognition protocols." Lee's eyes widened. "Are you saying we could reactivate them?" Dr. Bay nodded. "The Dreadnought's broadcast an authentication signal. As our fleet moves through the galaxy, these installations will recognize us and come back online." Park's expression grew troubled. "So we could reclaim our empire with minimal effort, take back everything we once ruled." "We could," Lee agreed. "But should we? Our ancestors chose to give up that power for a reason. A tense silence fell over. The bridge. The question hung in the air unanswered. 3 weeks later, a fleet of 20 Earth dreadnoughts approached the hegemony capital world. The remaining 17 stayed behind to protect Earth. As Admiral Lee had predicted, their journey through hegemony space had triggered a cascade of activations, ancient human outposts awakening after 15,000 years of dormancy. On the hegemony homeworld, panic reigned. The High Council had gone into hiding, as reports flooded in about strange installations appearing across their territory. Massive structures rising from beneath oceans, emerging from mountain ranges, even materializing in orbit around major worlds. Most disturbing were the signals being broadcast from these installations, signals that bypassed all security measures and appeared on every communication device throughout hegemony space. The architects have returned. Stand by for verification. Aboard the Prometheus, now in orbit around the hegemony capital, Admiral Lee and Secretary General Park prepared to address the alien leadership. The ship's sensors showed the planet below in chaos, with riots in major cities and military units. In disarray, we could simply take control, Lee noted. Their systems are already responding to our authentication codes. Their weapons are powered down. Their fleets are paralyzed. Park shook her head. That's exactly what we must not do. Conquering them would just restart the cycle that destroyed us before. The door to the briefing room slid open, and Dr. Bay entered. She had barely slept since discovering the truth about humanity's past. Spending every waking moment studying the historical database, I found something important, she said, activating the room's holographic projector. An image appeared, a message recorded by a solemn-faced man in ancient clothing. This is the final testimony of High Architect Yoon, recorded as our civilization collapses around us, said the figure. If you're watching this, you are our descendants, and you've awakened the Dreadnought fleet. You now face the same temptation that destroyed us, the lure of absolute power. The ancient humans' eyes seemed to look directly at them across 15 millennia. We built wonders. We spread life across the stars. But we came to see ourselves as gods, and that was our downfall. Remember this, the galaxy does not need rulers, it needs guardians. The message ended, leaving the room in silence. Guardians, not rulers, Park repeated softly. I think I understand now. Hours later, the leaders of the hegemony were brought aboard the Prometheus, not as prisoners, but as guests. They entered the ship's grand conference room with a mixture of fear and awe, expecting to face their conquerors. Instead, they found Admiral Lee, Secretary General Park, and Dr. Bay waiting to greet them not as enemies, but as long-lost children. We did not come to destroy your civilization or to rule over you, Park explained to the stunned aliens. We came to offer you something more valuable, the truth about yourselves and about us. Over the following days, as the ancient human installations continued to reactivate across the galaxy, Earth shared its discoveries with the hegemony leadership. They learned that they had been created by the very beings they had attempted to conquer, that their technological heritage, which they had thought to be their own innovation, was in fact the legacy of humanity. Most shocking of all was the revelation that dozens of other spacefaring races shared this same heritage. All of them, creations of the architects, all of them building their civilizations on fragments of human technology, without knowing its origin. What happens now? Asked the Hegemony Council leader, her voice subdued. Will you reclaim your empire? Admiral. Lee shook his head. There will be no empire. The age of conquest is over. Instead, Earth proposed something revolutionary, a galactic forum, where all sentient species could meet as equals, sharing knowledge and resources without domination or subjugation. We were the first to reach the stars, Secretary General, Park told them. But that doesn't give us the right to rule them. It gives us the responsibility to ensure that what happened before never happens again. As the ancient human installations reactivated across the galaxy, they did not deploy weapons or establish control systems. Instead, they began broadcasting knowledge, the true history of the galaxy, the principles behind the technology that all spacefaring races had been using without understanding. Earth could have conquered the stars with minimal effort. Instead, it chose to become their shepherd and protector. Not because humans were incapable of domination, but because they had learned from the catastrophic mistakes of their ancestors. As Admiral Lee stood on the observation deck of the Prometheus, watching the first diplomatic vessels from a dozen alien worlds approach Earth, he thought about how close they had come to repeating history, how easily power could have corrupted them again. "We were gods once," Dr. Bay said quietly, joining him at the viewport, "and we destroyed ourselves with our own divinity." Lee nodded. "This time we'll be something better than gods," he replied. "We'll be human,